Now it's time for poly nonsense.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Poly Nonsense, hosted by Captain Kirk.
That's me.
And I am some guy named Jason. On the show today, we're talking about the border, the surprise January 6th hearing, what's going on in the primaries, Nancy Pelosi elbowing her way in there, the Ukrainian war, errors, corrections, and headlines. But first, let's get into the Supreme Court. Now, what a couple of weeks this has been. The Supreme Court has come out with, obviously the big one was the Roe versus Wade. That decision has caused quite a ruckus. But we also have Carson versus Macon. We have the New York gun ruling. And we also have Joseph Kennedy in Washington. All of these decisions have really stirred up the old hornet's nest.
I feel like a kid in a candy store. Like, there's so much to talk about and so little time.
There is a lot. Well, let's go with the Roe versus Wade, the Dobbs decision. For me personally, I don't really care about where you stand on the issue. Where you stand on pro-life, pro-choice, it doesn't really matter. What I think is what's interesting here is the releasing of the federal government of involvement in abortion. That's what really gets me. The pushing away of power from the centralized power to the states.
Right, so what the Supreme Court did is diffused the centralized power obtained in the Roe v. Wade decision 49 years ago and reversed it, and is now able to give up that centralized power. And, that's monumental precedent.
And it's driving people crazy.
The reactions are ridiculous.
I don't think people understand what actually happened. When you're trying to light a police officer on fire in California, which is a quote-unquote haven state, they actually want to build some sort of industry behind abortion, and you're rioting in California, what does that do? Or like here in Colorado, when you riot in Colorado, Colorado has literally the most, if not the most, liberal view of abortion, and you have people rioting here. It doesn't make any sense to me. With the Carson and the Macon ruling, that's with the school vouchers, and with the Joseph Kennedy in Washington ruling, that's about school prayer. Now people have taken that to mean that the Supreme Court is now trying to make us all Judeo-Christian centered people.
Theocrats.
Exactly. Yes.
So let's do this. Let's steel man what the folks who are upset about these decisions believe. In the Dobbs decision, that's the Roe v. Wade overturning, they believe now that you are unable to get an abortion anywhere at any time, and you will be hunted down by federal agents if you attempt to obtain one. In the Carson case, now you have to fund religious schools out of your own tax money in order to fund an educational system that leads to a theocracy. In the New York State concealed carry permit case, now everyone can have a weapon for any reason, and the states are not allowed at all to restrict the Second Amendment. With the Joe Kennedy prayer case, now everyone will have to pray after a football game with their head coaches if their head coaches do the same.
If he was a Satanist, then we'd all have to participate in his satanic rituals after the game.
That is what they believe.
You were talking about before the show how these are very narrow decisions. What do you mean by that?
Yes, so with the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court did not get rid of something called substantive due process, which is a made-up judicial interpretation of the 14th Amendment. In the Carson case, the Supreme Court did not force upon the taxpayers the requirement to fund religious school tuition. In that case, they limited it to if you offer tuition to these schools, you cannot discriminate solely based on their religious affiliation, which seems pretty straightforward to me. With the Kennedy decision, they did not throw out all the precedent on the Establishment Clause. They threw out something called the Lemon Test, which hasn't been used in decades. So that determined whether or not certain religious practices constitute the establishment of a state or federal religion. So all of these were really limited comparison to liberal justices. The conservative ones, small c conservative ones, believe in limiting principles. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Where, in the Dobbs case, Roberts, who is typically going to be the swing vote, did not go with the majority. He had a concurring opinion. He did not want to throw out Roe v. Wade. He wanted to chip away at it. Set it up for future courts to chip away at it, and then you can eventually overturn it through a series of precedences. What Thomas wanted to do was throw out everything. So he is the extreme example, but he was alone. So all these cases were about very limited, particular issues, not expanding federal government power and dispersing it to the states.
So do you think with these decisions, so I've heard a lot about how the Supreme Court is now, it's gone rogue. It is now not being controlled by anything. It's not being controlled by the president. It's not being controlled by the House or the Senate. It's just doing its own thing. Do you think now that it has gone rogue, that it is operating independently of anything else?
That's the most laughable thing I've ever heard. These justices are dispensing with, are doing away with the coalescence of federal power. If anything, we should be applauding them. We should not be demanding that they act as lawmakers. They are not. They are justices of the court. Their role is to interpret the Constitution, not follow whatever some polling agency puts out the night before.
Well, it's interesting because almost with all of these rulings, it's the giving up of control.
Yes.
It's the giving up of power from the government, and even from the New York gun case, from the state, where the power is limited. So if they are operating on their own, if they are going rogue, how is it giving up power is a bad thing? How is forcing these things to go back to the people and having them decide it, how is that taking away democracy?
Good question. And there's a lot of consternation about, well, how can the Supreme Court rule the way they did in Dobbs and rule the way they did in the New York gun case? Dobbs' decision is ostensibly about states' rights. Shouldn't the gun case also be about states' rights? Except the Second Amendment is only an enshrinement of the right to keep and bear arms. So with abortion, there is no amendment, there's no subsection, there's no mention of it in the Constitution. So that goes down to the Ninth Amendment, which is federal power, and then the 10th Amendment, which is state power. So they delineated that issue of abortion to the states. And this is ironic because of the way the 14th Amendment has been interpreted. There's something called incorporation, which through precedents, there have been decisions passed down that ties the Bill of Rights to the states. Before the 14th Amendment, the Bill of Rights only applied to the federal government. So because of incorporation, the Second Amendment applies to the New York State gun case. And because of the 2008 Heller decision, which expanded individual rights to keep and bear arms, New York State's concealed carry permit process was discriminatory against otherwise eligible gun owners.
What the Supreme Court just did was that they chose to endanger the lives of all women and all birthing people in this country. But not only that, they've chosen to strip rights from men too. Because frankly, the right to our own bodies and the right to form our families, this is something that belongs to all of us. And it does not belong to lawmakers.
If the internet has shown me anything through this whole thing, it's really shown me a true fear of true democracy, because true democracy means that the majority controls everything. And the majority tend to be a bunch of dullars,
the 15% of the country that really believes in abortion being something that should be the right of a woman up until the point of birth, that's about 15% of the country, it is not the majority, they are out of step with popular opinion. And so that's the group that you're seeing, rioting and being noisy, because in the absence of persuasion, coercive tactics reign supreme.
Indeed. And with the 17th Amendment, which took away the state legislature's power to appoint senators, we now have the direct democracy election of senators. And as we've seen, it hasn't really brought up the best in us. It has just eroded away more of our federalist constitutional system.
And once the program or once the system does not go the way that they want it to, they just want to get rid of the system. Now let's pack the courts. Now let's get rid of the Senate. Now let's get rid of the filibuster. None of these things, let's get rid of the electoral college. None of these things have benefited you or are benefiting you, so therefore let's just get rid of it.
And by benefiting you mean benefiting us Democrats, the ones who are making this argument. They want to get rid of something called judicial review. They discovered Marbury versus Madison, a 1802 decision where the Supreme Court usurped powers for themselves of something called judicial review, where they can strike down laws, where before that they didn't have that power. They delegated that to themselves. And so these liberals, now that everything has turned against them in just the past couple of years, want to turn against that which has helped them from the 1950s up through the early 2000s, the power of the Supreme Court to make law from the bench.
Because I've heard that the reason why a lot of Democrats and the left side of the aisle is really upset is because they've lost in the Supreme Court another legislative branch for them, which it's not a legislative branch at all. It's supposed to interpret the law and either accept the law or deny the law.
Because they can't get anything done through the federal legislature, through the Senate. They want to, like you said, get rid of the filibuster. They want to dissolve it. They want to just have us with a unicameral legislative body, the House of Representatives. Well, they own that, imagine that. Through constant pumping out of that propaganda that, nothing's working for us. They hope to do a great reset on the American constitutional process.
I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind, and you will pay the price. You won't know what hit you if you go forward with these awful decisions.
It's all just electoral at this point. Do you think any of this rhetoric, do you think any of this mindset is being pushed this way because they can see the tidal wave that's going to be coming at them this fall?
This effort is entirely anti-electoral because they see that the voters are going to rise up and raise hell come November if things go as planned.
Do you think any of these rulings will affect the voters?
Not at all.
At all?
No.
So this Dobbs decision is not going to...
This will not change one single race, either in the House or the Senate, or in the governorship.
And after living through the Trump era, where he didn't respect anything, and everyone was so upset that he didn't respect any sort of institution, he didn't respect any sort of rule, now they want to change everything to where it does nothing but benefit one side.
Who are the real anti-institutionalists? Is it the crazy Republicans or the anarchist Democrats?
Well, theoretically, maybe both. Okay, now on to the border crisis. After the wake of the tragic news of the up to 50 people dead in the back of a semi-truck in Texas with no air conditioning, no water, absolutely tragic, horrible story.
I believe we're going to need more medics.
4 hours before first responders descended on this semi-truck in San Antonio in a desperate attempt to save lives.
So far I have about 1, 2, 3, probably about 6 or 7 more patients that I can see.
The driver, identified by Mexican government officials as Homero Zamorano, caught on camera crossing through this CBP checkpoint in Ensenal, Texas. The new information released in a press conference hosted by Mexican President Manuel López Obrador.
El doble discurso.
The Mexican officials released this map of the truck's alleged route. It's believed the migrants were loaded into the truck on the U.S. side near Laredo before heading north. The truck also cleared the Cotulla CBP inspection point before ending up in southwest San Antonio. Zamorano arrested in a nearby field, pretending to be one of the injured smuggled migrants.
Our attention still has to be pushed towards the border. What is going on with the border? Is there anything that's going to happen with it? With not only the push of humanity that's coming, and now we have another train of immigrants on their way up here, fentanyl is pouring into the country from China via Mexico. Not everyone that's crossing the border is a refugee. Although with the refugees, they are talking about how up to 557 people have died in the past 12 months on the border. Now, obviously, with the chaos that's going on down there, that's the number that we know. It might be more. But what can be done? A, and B, is the administration trying, at least trying to do anything about it?
You would think with a November election coming up, where they're about to lose probably both houses of Congress, thus dooming any hope for any sort of immigration reform or something resembling it, that they would pretend to act, that they would pretend to do something. But all they're doing are prosecuting these border agents who were
didn't even
alleged
do anything.
to allegedly whipped migrants. And meanwhile, we have 40 people packed in a semi-truck dead, the 500 migrants found dead. And like you said, those are just the ones that we found. Imagine the ones that are just buried out there alone.
And from what I know, Vice President Harris, she is theoretically still in charge of this. She was the one that was appointed, I don't know how many months ago, to do something about this. This was her baby. She's supposed to take care of this. I think she went once, and she went to a town that was within 50 miles of the border, so she never actually went to the border. She has done nothing with this. And not even from the humanitarian angle, but also from the drug angle. This fentanyl is a very dangerous drug. And it's odorless. You don't know if you're taking it. So if you are doing anything like that, you stand a real chance of being killed.
And from what I've heard, it only requires a little bit amount of fentanyl to kill you. So any amount that's cut into the heroin that you're doing,
or the cocaine, or even the marijuana. Yeah. So what? I don't understand. For me, I don't understand how the administration can literally do nothing about this whole crisis, about this problem. Because if they did actually care about the immigrants, they would figure out a way, to curtail them from coming here, because they're all coming here knowing that they have a real shot of staying. So if they could just curtail that a little bit, also make this more of a legitimate process. Because I'm not saying that we shouldn't have immigrants. I'm not saying that the United States was built on immigration. I don't really know many people that were born, or their ancestors were born in this country. A lot of people came here from other countries. But the lack of effort, the lack of thought, just the lack, I think, to me, is just it's so stunning.
Do the people running our country believe in borders?
And see, that is what's crazy. If they don't believe in borders...
Because I don't think they do.
An unrelenting stream of immigration. Non-stop. Folks like me who were Caucasian of European descent, for the first time in 2017, will be in an absolute minority in the United States of America. absolute minority. Fewer than 50% of the people in America, from then and on, will be white European stock. That's not a bad thing. That's a source of our strength.
I think these are multinationalist, globalist individuals who view us as just one part of a larger puzzle piece of a world government. And not even in a conspiratorial New World Order way, just as an interlocked community in the global stage.
They just don't want to live on the border.
Right. Yeah. So that's why you have, Gretchen Whitmer and Governor Wolf in Pennsylvania wanting more immigrants. Well, that's nice. What about the people on the border?
Well, Governor Abbott, he specifically laid this tragedy at Biden's feet. And Biden responded with how he's grandstanding on a tragedy.
Oh, I'm going to use a school shooting to pass federal red flag laws.
And I think that you're raising the point about how the governor of that state responded really highlights part of the problem. Because his response, where there are 50 dead bodies in his state, is to go straight to politics instead of dealing with the realities of the issue.
So I just don't know. I don't know. And I guess I don't understand why nothing is being done. Like, literally nothing. And
would you want this administration to do anything?
Well, I don't know if they can.
Yeah. So if they make the effort to do something and they screw it up further, well, now we're even further in the ditch. So I'd rather just have them not have any power at all.
So what you're saying is are you saying wait until November? Or are you saying wait till 2024?
Well, we have to wait till November no matter what.
Right.
We want to do this in a democratic electoral way. There's no direct action that anyone can really take short of the dystopian vigilante justice of militiamen going down to the border and rounding up migrants and shipping them back. So we have to wait until a Congress can get in there that can fund ICE, defund certain priorities of the Biden administration to pull them in line and conduct hearings and pull people in front of them.
I just wish something would be done. I mean, I don't know. I'm so frustrated with it that I really don't know what to say about it.
I don't want to be the doom pill guy here, which is when everything's going to hell and nothing's good, because I do have a slight optimistic side to myself.
Very slight.
Very slight. It's a ambivalent pessimism, but nothing's going to get done about the border issue as long as this administration has control of it.
And I don't want people to think that people coming in is the best thing that can happen to them. They're being trafficked.
Mm-hmm.
Drugs are being trafficked. Mm-hmm. This whole thing is dehumanizing in a way that I don't think a lot of people realize.
To be fair, Kamala Harris did tell people to not come, so.
And they obviously listened.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come.
Welcome back to Poly Nonsense. Now we're going to talk about the surprise session of the January 6 hearings. Liz Cheney questioning Cassidy Hutchinson, the assistant of the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. They're saying it bombshells. They're saying a lot of things have come to light. What do you think about that?
Well, what are the allegations? What I'm familiar with, because I dropped out of watching these damnable hearings.
The first real thing is that Trump's an asshole.
Well,
that's what they...
Breaking news alert.
Yeah, breaking news.
Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now."
So Cassidy Hutchinson is alleging that Donald Trump had, in a motorcade being transferred, I suppose, to maybe a bunker or something during the January 6th riot, had requested to go back, turn around, whatever, and that the driver, who I believe would be a Secret Service agent at this point, had refused, and Donald Trump allegedly lunged. That's the main takeaway, the main word being used in the media. Lunged.
I don't know if you've seen Donald Trump physically. I don't think he's lunged at anything other than cheeseburger as of late.
Heyo.
To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
That's one of the things about the criticism of Trump is that, that he's out of shape, he's morbidly obese, he's not as fit as Ronnie Jackson claimed he was. But now they expect us to believe that he would actually actively reach out and try and choke somebody in order to have them turn around.
And was Mr. Engel in the room as Mr. Ornato told you this story?
He was.
Did Mr. Engel correct or disagree with any part of the story from Mr. Ornato?
Mr. Engel did not correct or disagree with any part of the story.
Did Mr. Engel or Mr. Ornato ever after that tell you that what Mr. Ornato had just said was untrue?
Neither Mr. Ornato nor Mr. Engel told me ever that it was untrue.
CNN and ABC have done actual reporting, and they have contacted the Secret Service to determine whether or not that actually happened.
Wait, so the bombshell here is that CNN did actual reporting?
That is the most that's the most breaking news item in the whole story.
Anyway, go ahead, sir.
No problem.
An official with the Secret Service told me that Tony Ornato denies briefing her on this, telling her that this transpired. It's also worth pointing out that according to this official, the lead Secret Service agent who was inside the vehicle denies that this incident ever occurred. Now, we're told that the Department of Homeland Security reached out to the January 6th Select Committee and said that these witnesses are willing to come testify to refute some of this testimony. We did get a statement, our colleague Ryan Nobles from the committee. I'll read you part of it. They say that the committee trusts the credibility of a witness who is willing to testify under oath and in public, but is also willing to hear any and all information that others may have that would aid in the investigation.
They contacted the Secret Service and they got a statement back denying that Trump ever lunged, that any of their agents were ever grabbed. So I'm really wondering what the heck this is all about. And in her taped deposition that they played, I don't know if anyone else caught it, she is trying to relate a conversation, and she says this.
But when we were in the offstage announce tent, I was part of a conversation. I was in the vicinity of a conversation where I overheard the president say something to the effect of, I don't effing care that they have weapons. They're not here to hurt me. Take the effing mags away. Let my people in. They can march to the Capitol from here. Let the people in. Take the effing mags away.
Now, when she says that, she had to correct herself because she at first was part of the conversation, but then she was just in the vicinity of a conversation. What is that?
That's eavesdropping? Eavesdropping?
That's hearsay.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Right.
Generally speaking, in order for hearsay to be admitted, it's going to have a certain degree of reliability for a judge to allow it into evidence. And a judge will scrutinize any statements from declarants who are not in court and not subject to cross-examination.
So, as we learned from the first impeachment hearing, hearsay is now the best say, because that was the entire accusation against Trump, is that people overheard him having conversations that he was going to pressure the Ukrainian president into this, that, or the other. So with this January 6th hearing, we have more hearsay, and we have no defense attorney to cross-examine, to object, or redirect.
And you were telling me before the show that there are other investigations going on right now with January 6th.
Right. We have concurrent investigations by the DOJ, who have subpoenaed and searched the homes of Jeffrey Clark and John Eastman, taken their electronic devices, according to the two attorneys, without providing a search warrant. And we have Merrick Garland running the DOJ. he is investigating this whole thing, and the January 6th panel is trying to pressure him into doing what they want because they are not a law enforcement body, and so they want the DOJ to act.
So do you think with this whole thing, because I don't see the Department of Justice they're not going to act from anything that's coming out of these hearings.
There are transcripts that the January 6th panel has shared with the DOJ. Is there any more evidence that they're going to share or turn over? I highly doubt there's anything that the DOJ doesn't already have.
So is the DOJ going to do anything about this at all?
We'll have to see. If they do anything, like you said, it won't be necessarily because of these hearings. So that's what people like Jamie Raskin, a panel member, Benny Thompson, Liz Cheney, and Kinzinger, all January 6th panel members, hope to provide that peer pressure to get the DOJ to act, which is hilarious considering what they accused the Trump administration of doing.
Well, yeah. I don't... How you cannot view this as strictly a political spectacle is beyond me.
We have two Republicans on this panel, and one is on the outs because the Illinois Democrats, so appreciative of his efforts to get to the bottom of January 6th, redistricted him into a unfavorable district. And so he's retiring. He's going to become, a lobbyist or something. And Liz Cheney, who is about to lose her seat in Wyoming in the August primary, those are the only two Republicans on that panel, and they're both anti-Trump and are proud of that.
Well, I guess what we found out is that Trump's a real jerk. All right, now back to the primary season. Kirk, I know you've been following this doggedly.
Yes, I have.
Can you give us some of the highlights?
Sure. So let's start with Colorado, our home. We have a governor up for re-election, Jared Polis. He's going to face Heidi Ganahl, the last Republican to win statewide office in Colorado. And she will face Polis in November. I don't believe she will beat him. I think, unfortunately, the headwinds, even in a red wave, favor Polis.
Polis is a pretty popular...
People like him. He's signed into law SB 217 after the Floyd riots, which hampered the police. That gave him a lot of credit on the left. He also signed into law the Protect Planned Parenthood's Bottom Line Act, just in time for the Roe decision. He is probably going to be reelected. And then in the Senate side, Michael Bennet is up for re-election. He's going to go up against Joe O'Dea. He beat Ron Hanks. Ron Hanks was at the Capitol during the January 6th riot. I don't think he entered the Capitol.
They have pictures of him there,
exactly,
yelling and screaming and doing all that.
Yeah, he was present there. And I don't think he's ever apologized or said anything to try and walk it back. So had Ron Hanks won, he'd be hounded by Kyle Clark of 9 News and the Denver Post and everyone trying to take him down as a Trump-endorsed candidate. Indeed, the Democrats spent untold globs of money trying to get him elected by meddling in Republican primaries, calling him the more conservative candidate. He was a Trump-backed candidate, X, Y, and Z, trying to get him elected to be beaten in November more easily than Joe O'Dea presumably will be. I think Bennett will be reelected again. No one's really laid a glove on Bennett in these last 12 years. He's a silent workhorse, which means you don't see him ever, and he doesn't do anything. So I think he's a safe bet.
The winner of this takes on Michael Bennet. If you go back to 2010, 12 years ago, big red wave Republican year, this is when Michael Bennet first got elected to the Senate from Colorado. Note how close the race was. Bennet defied the national trend that year toward the Republicans. Why? Because the opponent he drew in that election, Ken Buck, was seen as out of step too out of step with where Colorado voters were, particularly on the topic of abortion. Buck had a similar a platform on abortion as you now see with Hanks. So that's why Democrats are spending, I think, so aggressively on behalf of propping up Hanks in this primary. That's how Bennett got elected in the first place. He drew a weaker opponent in the general election in 2010, and in what was overwhelmingly a Republican year in 2010, Michael Bennett got himself elected to the Senate barely. They think that's how he could survive this year if they could knock Joe O'Dea out in this primary today.
And then there's a Attorney General seat. John Kilner, who is the 18th Judicial District DA, won that unopposed. So he'll go up against Phil Weiser. Phil Weiser is a kind of a lefty, kooky professor who won his way into the AG spot. I think he's probably going to be reelected. He hasn't really offended any of the Democrats in Colorado to offend them and not vote for him again. I don't think the red wave is going to propel Kilner, though I think he's a good guy. New York. Kathy Hochul won the primary. She's going to probably be reelected as the governor of New York.
And she's not going to go anywhere.
She's not going to go anywhere.
There's no way.
Just like Cuomo, it took everyone abandoning him to finally step down. It would take a major screw-up on her part to have that kind of abandonment. She's going to beat Lee Zeldin. He's a New York Republican representative. He beat Giuliani's son pretty handily.
Well, speaking of handily, you saw what happened to Giuliani.
Heyo.
Heyo.
It was a pat on the back.
It's a pretty stiff pat on the back. It was stiff. That air movement.
Contact was made. Contact was made. And then we have, I think, the most interesting race that kind of went under the radar, if not for a Project Veritas video, is a Senate primary runoff in South Carolina for the Democrat senatorial spot to take on Republican Tim Scott.
How long has Tim Scott held his office?
So he won a special election in 2014 after being appointed in, I believe, 2010. And then he was re-elected in 2016. So now he's up in 2022. He said he's not going to run for a third term if he's re-elected this time. He's a pretty popular guy. He's one of the few black senators in the Senate. He has faced black candidates opposing him in every one of his elections. So Crystal Matthews, who is a state representative in South Carolina, had tied with her opponent in the June 14th primary and went to a runoff. And a couple days ago, this audio had dropped where she had called an inmate who was an activist in South Carolina, and they discussed some pretty interesting campaign strategies.
My first question is this: what can we do to help you with your campaign, first of all?
I know y'all both activists, and I am too in my own way, right? I'm very much in a lot of ways, but I know how to turn it off and turn it on. You know, I know how to be in certain spaces. You know, you got to be able to turn it off and turn it on.
Correct.
So, like, we literally, y'all, like, this is the only way you're going to change the dynamics in South Carolina. You got to find some folks that are a little bit polished, maybe are not, you know, nobody really knows them that well. Maybe they haven't really been politically active. But we need some secret sleepers. Like, we need them to run as the other side, even though they for our side. And we need them to win.
Right.
Because that's how, like, I mean, we can battle them in public all day. As long as we know we working for the same goal. You know, I tell my colleagues up here all the time, I'm going to be that bitch every day of the week. Got too many people that ain't out for us and look like us. I mean, but honestly, these ain't the same type of black people that I grew up around. I don't recognize these black people. So, I don't black because I don't understand the type of black that they are. Now, can I talk intelligently? I can move in all kind of circles, but I'm a nigga. I love black people. I feel safest around my people. So, for me, I feel like, y'all, we need sleepers, but we need a group of sleepers We need some folks that we need some folks that can wear all black at night and take their yard signs down when they sleeping. The same shit they do to us, just the other way.
Right,
you know what I'm saying? We ain't gotta make a bunch of noise about it. We ain't gotta go live about it. Just don't say shit. Just like when somebody drop money and you pick it up. You pick that shit up and keep walking. And then when you get in there, when we get enough of us in there, we can wreak havoc for real from the inside out. Then we can flip some from the inside out. We gotta take back some of these seats, especially in these local elections. You know, we need people to run as Republicans in these local elections. And we need, I mean, they family, they can't tell their family, you know, period. Because I can't trust family. Family, the first turn on you. You can't tell them. So, you know, like, man, I didn't think he would ever be a Republican. You know, they're going to have to be able to listen. When I say they're going to have to be able to take to I'm talking about at the dinner table at Thanksgiving when they on the Republican ticket and everybody at the table looking at them sideways like, I can't believe y'all on the Republican. They got to be able to take that on their chin. Yep. And I still got to struggle to raise money for my campaign. Where the f*** is my black people with money? I don't care about no dope money. Give me that dope boy money. Where the f*** is dope? Where the duffel bag boys? Find you somebody in your family that don't even know you donating to my campaign and put that shit under their name.
So in just those few minutes, she's talking about rigging elections and drug money.
Using drug money to win campaigns. My goodness.
That's good work if you could get it.
Yeah.
Wow. What was her rebuttal to that? Has she? I mean.
Yeah. So the AP reached out for comment. She called it a tongue-in-cheek exchange with context missing from the video.
There was a lot of tongue. I don't know how much cheek there was.
Yeah, I don't think that tongue made any contact with that cheek.
Well, and didn't you say too? She has a name for her opponents. Uncle Scott, or
yeah. So a couple of years ago, she called Tim Scott Uncle Scott.
That's goodness gracious. So he's been entrenched. He's been there for a while. So with her doing this, it probably is not looking good for her.
I mean, there's tanking your campaign, then there's really tanking your campaign, and she really tanked her campaign. And the entire idea that you'd be calling somebody in a prison and not keep in mind that it's going to be recorded, it's just insulting.
Yeah, so any of our listeners out there who are listening to this, if you do not want to have your phone call recorded,
do not call a prison.
Don't call a prison.
Do not call a prison.
Don't call a prison. Don't call a prison.
It's a bad idea.
Bad idea. And last, of course, we can't forget about old Nancy Pelosi.
Good old Pelosi.
So, Mayra Flores, she's in Washington, getting her picture taken with the Speaker of the House.
Mayra being the first Mexican American, being the first representative born in Mexico to win a special election in a seat that hasn't been held by a Republican in something like 150 years.
150 years. So she's there with her beautiful family, taking pictures with Nancy Pelosi, and her daughter, who I don't know how old she is, but she looks like she could be 7, 8, possibly 9. Mm-hmm. Nancy Pelosi gives her the old elbow, gives her the old chicken wing to kind of move her to the side. It is one of the most awkward things you could see, seeing an old, for lack of a better term, rich woman,
privileged white woman
pushing away
an innocent Latina.
Yeah, like, oh my goodness, it's so awkward. Has Nancy Pelosi talked about that at all?
Yes, she has. She claims that she was just trying to ensure, and I'm not making this up, there's audio. She tried to ensure that little Miss Flores was actually more prominent in the photo so that she wasn't over.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi responded to claims that she put elected Republican Congresswoman Mayra Flores in ceremony. Pelosi says she was actually trying to ensure in frame.
So ensuring like a Crystal Matthews.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Precisely. Welcome back to Poly Nonsense. I am Captain Kirk with this guy Jason. Now, with a couple of episodes under our belt, we have, unfortunately, made a couple of errors.
Just a few.
So, Jason, go ahead and do a rundown of the mistakes we've made.
All right, errors and corrections. So, last week, Kirk, you said that the capital of Alaska was Fairbanks. I'm sorry, it's not. It is Juneau.
Apologies to Ellen Page.
You don't know your capitals. Also, too, where we're talking about Hadrian's Wall, I said that the Hadrian Wall was built in the 3rd century. I apologize. It was built in the 2nd century.
Like, how do you get something so simple?
I don't know.
Come on.
I had to build up to it. And now the headlines that we just didn't get to.
Astronaut love triangle. Lisa Novak is finally at peace 15 years after attacking romantic rival.
Oh, that's nice. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
O.J. Simpson is being sued for $96 million by Fred Goldman over his son's death. I don't think he has $96 million.
I don't think he has $96. Hinckley apologizes for assassination attempt on Reagan 4 decades ago. Expresses true regret.
That's good. And finally, the Chinese father breaks down after son he tutored daily for a year scores 6 out of 100 on a math exam. That is disappointing.
An entire year of tutoring only to get 6 out of 100.
It doesn't add up. Thank you so much for listening to Poly Nonsense. If you want to listen to any of our past episodes, please go to polynonsense.com. You can contact us. Let us know if you like us. Let us know if you hate us. Just let us know. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.